So I think communication is key here. Having town halls where you can communicate to your congressman is super important, as well as being open to being fact-checked. You know, right now we kind of have an issue where our leadership doesn't like being checked on their facts. And I'm very open to being corrected. You know, if I have something wrong, I want to be notified. And I think being open to that and having an open communication with the people you represent is key.
Mr. Michal.
Trust in the federal government has declined from 1960 to present, from 67% to 20%. That's a significant concern. There are pillars that have happened throughout the years within different decades, really stemming from 1975 through some Watergate scandal and also the church sessions to weapons of mass destruction and COVID-19, and now we have the Epstein files. And the problem with that is every time one of those pillars gets removed from our trust, we formulate this lack of responsibility as voters because we don't trust the system for which it stands. And that's really unfortunate. So we've got to get to involving our communities and our constituents with the facts in our federal government in order to inform them on what decisions are being made at the federal level by your congressman.
Mr. Stiles.
Thank you. Misinformation doesn't make our lives more affordable. Misinformation undermines the public trust. And it doesn't create a stable environment for us to move forward with our lives to make them better. So what I'm saying is there currently in our administration, we have an issue with people trying to tell us that things aren't the way that they seem. And they are getting us off on our back heels and making us react all the time to the latest panic du jour of the day. And none of that does anything to make our lives better in our district. Thank you.
Mr. Blomquist.
I think most misinformation and most siloing of information has a partisan origin. And so much of what I encounter on a daily basis, where in a town where most of my friends have a different political opinion than mine, is you can agree with that person for 45 minutes before someone attributes it to Democrats or Republicans. And as soon as somebody attributes that, what you've learned is that there is a distrust in the system, there's a distrust in the other. When instead we have so much in common. Human beings start in a point of agreement. And so what I say is you attack the issues based on the issue's own merits. That you do not capitulate in areas like on immigration when we start talking about these things as if it is a threat to our democracy. As soon as you start to allow that to happen, that's when you allow that misinformation. And I say, speak to the facts of the matter, speak confidently, and the truth will percolate to the top.
Mr. Michal, you will be answering first for our next question. What policies would you prioritize to ensure economic opportunity and access to services for working families in rural and small town northern Michigan?
That's a really good question. We're facing some technological advances in this country that could significantly change how employment is viewed. There's an existential threat that's happening in changing in corporations from a transition to human capital to AI. And it's something that's really going to be a challenge in our rural communities as well as our populated areas and cities. We could experience some significant reductions in the workforce. Some estimates put that at roughly 50% of the population could be unemployed, which brings significant challenges when you're talking about tax revenue, tax bases, and the way that people live. And I don't think right now, currently, anyone's addressing that. So one of the factors that I would look into first is figuring out how we're going to mitigate the damage that can be caused by the technological increases and advancements in AI.
Mr. Stiles?
So what I think the most important policy is the affordability of housing right now. The median income for our district is around $67,000 for a family. If you extrapolate that out, for a mortgage, you can afford about a $175,000 house. Right now in our district, for a modest 1,100 square foot house, for a new build, it's gonna cost you between $275,000 and $325,000 for a modest build. There's a huge gap there that's almost insurmountable to people. At $175,000, that's like a 700 square foot house. So what we need to do is get federal grants in place to cover the gap. We need, there's gonna be a multi-pronged attack to deal with housing, but we gotta get people lifted up in the middle class so they can afford housing. Thank you.
Mr. Blomquist?
I'll ask if possible, if you could repeat the question.
Of course. What policies would you prioritize to ensure economic opportunity and access to services for working families in rural and small-town northern Michigan?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in the Upper Peninsula in particular is healthcare access. I support Medicare for all. Universal, comprehensive, inclusive healthcare, wherever you are, when you need it, without the fear of claim denial, care avoidance, or medical debt. The United States of America is the only developed nation in the world that does not provide universal healthcare to all its citizens, and I believe that should change. I believe that there are structural issues in terms of the availability of general practitioners of care in the Upper Peninsula, and addressing that issue is paramount to the vitality of our communities. Is if you do not have a functioning healthcare system, if you cannot get quality care in rural America, then those communities suffer.
Mr. Featherly?
I'm actually gonna go back towards Justin's point on the AI issue. So I'm very excited about AI. I think it has a lot of potential to do a lot of good for our country. However, it also has a lot of potential to cause a lot of harm for working families. And I think there's potential, there's few different routes we can go down to safeguard against that possibility. I think we need to look into basically putting guardrails up for if unemployment rate gets too high. We need to look into universal basic income, and then another thing is shared wealth fund. That is something that Alaska currently has, and I think we should look more into it and decide if we need to put that in place if things are getting out of hand.
Mr. Stiles, you'll be answering first for our next question. What are ways you would support rural hospitals? How would you work to reopen closed rural hospitals and/or stop more from closing?
Thank you. So I'm a proponent of a single-payer healthcare system, but I can also see where a universal healthcare system can also be beneficial. What can happen with people having access to healthcare money at a federal level is that people in their own communities can then afford to spend money in their communities. They have access to healthcare. Eventually the doctors are gonna start saying, hey, I can open a small practice here in this small town. When they do that, they're gonna need staff. Then they're gonna need the buildings to be renovated and have places for people to stay. Once you need that, you're starting to rebuild your small towns. You need skilled labor, and then once you get skilled labor, that's bringing more money into your community. So I think healthcare at the federal level can actually help rebuild our small towns.
Mr. Blomquist?
I think you have to start by understanding why rural hospitals close. It's because the profit motive that is underlying our system has not been satisfied. And so these conglomerated hospital systems have the option to close down your clinic, not because your community does not require that care, but because it is no longer profitable to them. I believe that we need to fix that system, and I would say this, is if a hospital system is determined that your community is no longer viable and profitable, and if they are going to close down, then the federal government should be able to come in, step in, and provide care and open those clinics as a public utility of sorts, a public service that is funded by the federal government to make sure that there is continuity of care in rural America.
Mr. Featherly.
I believe that healthcare is a human right. We're living in one of the most powerful, most wealthy countries in existence. And there should be no reason that healthcare should be profit-driven. Health of the citizens should not depend on whether a location can be profited off of. So I'm a big proponent for universal healthcare as well. I think that's the way we need to go towards, and I think that'll help our communities a lot.
Mr. Michal.
Out of our current budget right now, we spend $1.7 trillion on healthcare. If you want to put that into perspective, we spend roughly $900 billion on our entire military. And that's everything from bombs to bullets to payments. So when you're looking at the healthcare costs, Congress only gets to vote on appropriations for $18 billion worth of spending. And that's for federally qualified healthcare centers. And we have a few of those in our district. One of the issues that we run into is specialty care. Specialty care is really difficult. It's hard to get surgeons that have spent 14 or 15 years and have $700,000 in debt to get them to come to Northern Michigan to make minimal salaries when they look at an opportunity in Miami where they can make $1 million, $1.5 million a year. So how do we recruit those individuals to come to areas like this? And that may be one of the things that you talk about in appropriations, by providing some kind of subsidy or some type of extension to be able to give them a professional pay so they want to come to districts like this.
Mr. Blomquist, you will be answering first on our next question. Our region is already experiencing shoreline erosion, extreme weather events, and fluctuating Great Lake water levels. What role should Congress play in addressing climate-related impacts on the Great Lakes and supporting local resilience efforts?
I think that is a large enough issue that the federal government should be very involved in that process. That includes the subsidization and the creation of public green utilities here in the Upper Peninsula so that we can get away from reliance on fossil fuels and continually increase our carbon output. That includes shoreline stabilization efforts, things like the breakwall. That we need to be able to have federal spending in the areas that we need, and I would fight for those things in Congress. What we are seeing is that we have a particularly pristine environment here in the Upper Peninsula, that we have been blessed with these wonderful natural resources, and we need to protect those things, and they cannot be for sale. That we need to remove the profit motive underlying everything, and we need to focus on stabilizing our livelihood for the future. That includes our fisheries, that includes our shorelines, that includes our forests.
Mr. Featherly.
I grew up in Houghton, Michigan, right on the shores of Lake Superior, and I love our Great Lakes. I also spent 5 years working as a traveling wind technician, and I love green energy. And these are things that I've been interested in my entire life. And I think that federally we should be aiming to bring our entire country towards green energy and away from fossil fuels. I think that is the source of the entire issue. I think there's more things that we can do that are a little bit more Band-Aid, but I think that we should truly move towards more green future.
Mr. Michal, let me repeat the question for you since it's been a while. Our region is already experiencing shoreline erosion, extreme weather events, and fluctuating Great Lake water levels. What role should Congress play in addressing climate-related impacts on the Great Lakes and supporting local resilience efforts?
I think some of these factors are spans over time. I remember when I was growing up in Grayling, we'd go to Traverse City and the shoreline had extended out probably 250 or 300 feet. And there was always this concern that people were stealing water, but then over time it started to come back. And then other areas where I spent time fishing down in the Saginaw Bay, the same thing happened. The water retracted and then it came back in. And they say that they're usually on like a 14-year cycle that happens. And I do feel that there is, some concern on shore erosion, and there are things that you can do to prevent that. And I'm sure that there is funding that's available to help fix those things. But there is going to come a time where the water recedes again, and there's going to be more shoreline, and then eventually it'll come back. It's kind of the ebbs and flows of the time for which we live.
Mr. Stiles.
So you hear, like we're looking at all the snow and the weather that we've had up here, and they're like, whatever happened to global warming? And so I hate when I hear that. And I feel like at the federal level, we need to start getting some transparency and understanding how global warming works, slowing down those currents in the ocean, which allows more tropical storms to happen. We're getting wilder and more extreme weather events across the country. Michigan is probably going to fare better than most other places in the country, but as you can see, like these are some of the worst winters that I've seen in my lifetime. Part of the issue that we need to do at a federal level is we need to protect our shorelines by keeping corporate lawyers out of Michigan so we can have our own natural resources, we can protect them, and we need the federal funding to be able to fight off these corporations that want to come in here and strip our natural resources. And then renewable energy is important because of our tourism opportunities.
Mr. Featherly, you'll be answering our next question first. Many voters are concerned about the influence of large donors, corporations, and PACs in federal elections. What steps would you take in Congress to ensure that political power and policy decisions reflect the interests of everyday constituents rather than only those who can afford to spend the most?
Yes, I'm very against corporate money in our politics. I have a transparency page on my website that shows all of my donations and all of my spending towards my campaign. And I think that is the way that I would like to see our politics go. And I also would like to get rid of the super PACs and the giant ability for corporations to spend millions and millions of dollars in our politics.
Mr. Michal.
This is a very difficult question to answer, mainly because the Supreme Court ruled that corporations have a voice in our elections, and that was in 2010. And although a lot of us, especially grassroots candidates who are out there in the streets every day trying to get people to donate to your campaign that don't have the money or the affluency to donate a lot, you're trying to get small contributions, you feel a little bit outnumbered by those corporate interests that dump money into candidates that they appreciate. But I think one of the factors that we have to look at is that was a Supreme Court ruling. And although we would love to change some of those rules to benefit and make it more fair in that assessment, the only way to do that is through the legal system. And it's not something that Congress can do necessarily, but it's something that we need to look into and say, maybe the ruling is wrong, or maybe there's another way to attack it. So I definitely think that it's important because influence plays a huge factor in what's going on right now, current politics.
Mr. Stiles.
in my mind, this is the number one issue. What we have to do is overturn Citizens United by any means necessary. The reality is our political system is broken right now with the amount of money that is being brought into candidates. We need campaign finance reform. We need a complete overhaul of the way our government runs. And it's not just at like the level of running for office, because once you get there, all the money, the special interests, the corporate PACs are all driving funds raised for both parties, Republicans and Democrats, to get in there. And it's keeping them from actually doing any real work to make our lives better as citizens, not only in our district, but across our country. Thank you.
Mr. Blomquist.
I think that most Americans, when they're confronted with the realities of their elections and how they are fought and how their representatives serve alternative interests because of the money that they take when they're running for Congress, most Americans believe in overturning Citizens United with a constitutional amendment, and I do too. I also believe that we need to make it so that more people can win elections with less money. And part of that is instituting a system where we have publicly funded elections, where we have flattened that playing field so that people like me, people like the people on this stage, have the ability to compete with people who are otherwise taking millions and millions and millions of dollars from dark money sources. And once we're able to fix how our elections are funded, that's when we will be able to fix our democracy top to bottom. And it starts with the parties. I'm running for the Democratic Party nomination. I believe that the Democratic Party should not take billionaire and corporate money, period.
Mr. Michal, you'll be the first to answer the next question. What role should the federal government play in ensuring that public schools and districts like ours have stable funding, competitive teacher support, and equal opportunities for students?
As someone who spent 14 years in academia, education is really important to me. It wasn't something that I thought I'd be able to attain when I grew up in a small town. It was something that I challenged myself to do later in life, and it was something that I'm really appreciative of. The education system really struggles, mainly because it's funded by taxpayer money, and sometimes that money isn't sufficient enough to be able to give the education and the resources needed to boost the next generation of students and children and leaders in this country. We've got to figure out a bipartisan way to fix that. And I don't think that's an easy question. I think that's something that is open to discussion, and it's something that I definitely would champion because I believe that education is important, although education, again, is changing with the advancements of AI.
Mr. Stiles.
So at a federal level with education, we just need to invest a lot more into our education. And not everybody wants to go to college. Some people want skilled trades. I was one of those people. I went to a very small high school and I wanted to study drafting. Our school couldn't afford it, so I went to a career tech center. And that was like a great plan for me. But then I moved out of college after that, and I took advantage of grants, loans. We could have guaranteed jobs with service to our country. You have the GI Bill. We can make that stronger. There's a lot of positions at the federal level that we can do to give the people of our district a proper education to the level that they want to take it at. Thank you.
Mr. Blomquist.
I think what we have is we have a stratified education system in America. It depends on what your zip code is as to how your schools are funded, because they're funded primarily through property taxes. It depends on how wealthy your family is or how great your grades were in high school, how much you leave with student loan debt when you leave college. And we have situations where school districts are not able to recruit great teachers for their students. I believe that we need to increase the taxes on the ultra wealthy so that we can have education funding at a federal level. I believe that we need to pay our teachers in a similar way to how we pay our engineers, that it should be competitive, that the best and brightest should go into education. And I do not believe that our students should leave college with crippling student loan debt. As somebody who's experienced crippling student loan debt myself, it is garnishing their wages and it is lowering their potential and their purchasing capabilities within their community forever.
Mr. Featherly.
Education is such an important topic. I have multiple people that I know personally and I've talked to recently that we've had very at length discussions about education. The number one issue that I've heard from each person is funding. The number two issue is lack of teachers. But those are not separate issues, they are linked. And I would propose just a general overall increase in funding for education. Right now, public schools get about around 8% from federal funding, and I propose we increase that at least double, if not triple.
Mr. Stiles, you will be answering first for our next question. Large infrastructure jobs can generate benefits, but also trigger housing inflation, workforce displacement, and service system strain. What concrete policy mechanisms would you put in place in your first year to alleviate those strains?
Can you repeat the beginning of that question?
Sure. Large infrastructure jobs can generate benefits, but also trigger housing inflation, workforce displacement, and service system strain. What concrete policy mechanisms would you put in place in your first year to alleviate those strains?
That's a really good question, and I don't think I'm prepared to answer that at this time. However, when you have large infrastructure projects, that is also a great sign for our communities that you have projects coming in, you have jobs coming in, you have skilled labor coming into your areas. So I think it's worth the effort to find solutions to those kind of questions. I'm just sorry I don't have any information for you today.
Mr. Blomquist.
I think a principal among those concerns is housing availability and cost. In 1999, with bipartisan support, we passed something called the Faircloth Amendment. It was within a overall sweeping housing bill that was signed into law by Bill Clinton. That functionally eliminated the federal government's ability to invest in public housing. I believe that we should repeal the Faircloth Amendment and we should start funding public housing again. And that allows us to target communities that have the greatest need and address deep affordability at the bottom end of the market, where you have those working class, those server jobs, those service industry jobs that feed those communities. And those are the people that are the first to be displaced whenever there is growth in an area, and we need to serve those needs and eliminate the commoditization of our housing as a result. That when we have opportunities to grow industry in our communities, that we cannot be restricted and displacing the existing residents.
Mr. Featherly.
I do not have specific policy in mind. It is a very important issue. Right now, there's a lot of huge data centers that are trying to be installed all over the country. Just recently, there was one very near my current home in Traverse City that was almost installed, but got blocked. I think the potential for jobs to come in is great, but the potential for long-term damage is also there and needs to be looked at. While I'm not able to solve that issue right now, I am definitely interested in learning more about the subject.
Mr. Michal.
I think at the federal level, when you're talking about policy, the only policy that would essentially be relevant would be the fiscal responsibility of those if you're talking about government investment. A lot of the big infrastructure things that are being passed right now are done in the private sector. So if you have gas companies or electric companies that are putting money into infrastructure, they're paying for those costs up front. Now, some of those may be offered through government grants and other things, but the federal government typically, aside from giving money, doesn't really partake in that expenditure. So from my side of the aisle, I'm trying to be fiscally conservative because we're at $39 trillion in debt. So I really would like to look at how much of that government waste, fraud, and abuse would be distributed at the same time as the money actually going into those infrastructure if those allotments or grants are allowed. So you're just looking at it from a fiscal conservative position and saying, are we actually spending money on those, or is that money being distributed elsewhere?
Mr. Blomquist, you will be the first to answer our next question. What is your plan for supporting and enhancing the sovereignty of our Native American communities?
Thank you. I think that it really comes down to speaking to those communities and giving them the agency and process. I believe that the federal government owes those communities a great debt, a debt that has never been settled, a debt that has never been reconciled, and that we need to increase funding and then give them the agency on how those funds are used within those communities. And we need to extend services using things like Medicare for All, where we are able to not have different lanes and haves and have-nots throughout our district and throughout into our indigenous communities. And instead, we are funding those things and we are empowering those communities to rise up in the ways that they see as necessary, that they see as appropriate. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to do anything other than to empower those communities.
Mr. Featherly.
I think having those conversations and opening the line of communication and ensuring there's a path for them to take and for us to take to get to where we want to be. I think it's super important, especially where we are. And I don't know a ton about the subject, but I'm more than happy to learn more about it.
Mr. Michal.
I think we can all agree that Native sovereignty is extremely important. I mean, especially in our district, we have multiple different tribes and they have their own rules and regulations on how they go about navigating that space. I haven't met anyone that has been outspoken against tribal sovereignty or their willingness or ability to do the things that they want to do, and they pretty much govern themselves in that space. One of the things that you can do is say, what do you need help with? What can we support you with? And I think that those conversations will continue to happen as we continue to advance throughout this century. We're just looking at ways to cohabitate and make sure that everyone in that space gets the acknowledgement and the respect that they deserve. And again, I don't think any of us are out here championing taking away any of those sovereignties.
Mr. Stiles.
So tribal sovereignty has historically been a very complicated issue. There are literally hundreds of treaties out there. And it's our job to support those treaties, to honor them, and to work together with the Native American nations. And one important thing is, like, we recently closed a lot of the outreach centers for working between the groups. We need to do better with that. We need to move forward together and honor that heritage and the treaties that we've signed.
Mr. Featherly, you will be the first to answer our next question. The United States Ambassador to Israel has encouraged diplomatic staff to leave Israel at once, signaling that war with Iran may be imminent. What should U.S. policy toward Iran be, and what role should Congress play in those decisions?
We don't need more war. I don't know a ton about what brought this on, but we've made plenty of mistakes in our past. We've put our foot in a lot of unnecessary wars, and I don't think we need another one on our hands.
Mr. Michal.
As someone who has served in combat in the Middle East, I've also lived in the Middle East, done contract work in the Middle East. I specialize in global conflict. The current political situation is divisive, and it's a significant concern in terms of national security interests and also geopolitical interests. Right now, currently, there's probably a 12% populational approval of a war in Iran, and there is some concern if this escalates into tension, what that draws in terms of other players on the geopolitical scale. And that's frightening and alarming. As someone who wants to represent all of us, the last thing I want to do is send people into combat and deal with the horrors of war that soldiers and veterans have had to face generationally. So it's tough. Hopefully it de-escalates soon and we can work for some resolve.
Mr. Stiles.
This is one situation where I'll take that little kernel of truth in every situation. I would say this is one case where we say America first, and I can support that. I don't think that we need to be in Iran. We don't need to be starting a war. In my opinion, this is just another attempt at the current administration to deflect from the own issues that we have in our country. And we have these Epstein files that are out there, and it seems like every single week we have something new coming out of this administration that is trying to take our attention away from fixing our own internal issues. And now we've changed, Secretary of Defense to Secretary of War. I mean, it's crazy. It's nothing that I grew up with. I don't like it. Probably not doing a good job explaining this, except for the rich don't send their kids to war. The working class people do.
Mr. Blomquist.
I do not support war in Iran. I do not support war anywhere in the world where we are going to deploy US troops or ordnance. I do not think that we should continue to victimize the American working class by siphoning their dollars, their tax dollars that should be spent here at home, building their infrastructure, building their hospitals, building their homes, making sure that they have a sound lifestyle that they can rely on. I do not think that we should be spending that abroad on violence. I don't think that we should victimize the American working class so that we can go across the world and victimize the working classes of Iran or Venezuela or anywhere. I believe that we should not have $1 trillion military. That military should not grow in its budget every single year in a country that's surrounded by nothing but oceans and friendly allies. And I believe that we should take that posture and say so proudly that we need to spend our dollars home, and that we should bring all those aircraft carriers, all of that ordnance, all of those resources home, and we should start dismantling our military apparatus rather than continually rattling sabers across the world.
Mr. Michal, you'll be the first to answer our next question. Many people who live here do so to be away from big city life and in preference to living near protected natural environments. What are you prepared to do to ensure that we can still locally adopt and employ regulations that can limit the noise pollution, environmental damage, and or water contamination that may occur from the deployment of AI data mining facilities?
I think local jurisdiction is really important. It's something that's often overlooked. What's good for certain communities, especially in our district, we have 36 different counties and they all have different needs and different subcultures. If you've driven around this district, you'll realize that in my county of Crawford County, we're way different than the people who live in Baraga. So needs are completely different. The subcultures are completely different. And one of the things that we need to look at is supporting our local governments and giving them the resources that are necessary for them to make the right decisions for those communities. A lot of times the government steps in and tries to push certain legislative agendas in these rural communities because they're often predatorial, and that's sad. So one of the things that I would look into is making sure that these local communities have the ability to defend themselves against some of these attacks from corporate interests.
Mr. Stiles.
So I think we were really caught off guard with these AI data center mining operations. In my opinion, I think we need to seek a moratorium on these where we can step back, look at what we need to do, how we are going to protect our communities, how we're going to protect our natural resources, and who's going to pay for the infrastructure that needs to happen with these centers. I think these corporations looked at Michigan like, oh, there's an easy target. These guys can't defend ourselves. So at a federal level, we need to appropriate funds for these smaller communities to be able to defend themselves against this plethora of lawyers that get sent in to basically tell you in your town what they're going to do.
Mr. Blomquist.
I think it begins by understanding why there are so many data centers wanting to be located in places like northern Michigan. It is because we have rolled out the red carpet. We have provided at the state level, we've provided tax incentives. We encourage them to come here first and foremost. Then we have things like our water. We have an abundant cooling resource for them. And we have a condition that is ripe for those corporations to come and exploit us. And that condition is the looming threat of poverty that comes over the American working class everywhere, but especially in rural America. And what I want to do is I want to remove the sword of Damocles that hangs over the American working class, where every few years we have to mortgage our future, mortgage our once in a planet natural resources for a few short-term jobs. I want us to be able to negotiate those things from a position of strength. I believe that we should have a moratorium on the construction of data centers throughout America, and that's my general position on that.
Mr. Featherly.
AI is not going away. Data centers, the idea of just banning the building of data centers is not going to work. If we try to prevent them from being created, they're going to end up in some poor neighborhood's backyard. There's three key issues when it comes to these data centers. It's water usage, energy, and their physical footprint. There's potential solutions for all of these. Water, we need to ensure that they are using closed loop systems. They're not just using and dumping the water, they're not polluting the water. They need to, we need to federally ensure that they're using the water that they have and not just dumping it. Energy, we need to ensure that when they are taxing our energy grid, that the people of that community are not the ones that get hurt from it.
Mr. Stiles, you'll be the first to answer our next question. How are you planning to protect your LGBTQ+ constituents from discrimination?
Thank you. I was just talking to some people earlier before the event. My daughter is in a musical theater program in college, and we were talking about just the vibrant energy of that community and what's going on there, which can really take you aback if you're not prepared for it. But it's also awesome. So I feel like I'm not sure at a federal level how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to tell you that I'm 100% in support of protecting that community and other communities that have less voice than, let's say, a person like myself, white, Caucasian, male, of European descent.
Mr. Blomquist.
I think I believe in the individual autonomy, the personal bodily autonomy of all people. And that extends to gender identity and gender care. I believe that we should not be concerning ourselves with abusing and abandoning the most marginal within our society that does not help us. And I extend those protections when I talk about Medicare for all being universal, comprehensive, and inclusive. I mean it. I mean that if a cisgender man requires testosterone to improve their condition in life, they get that. If a postmenopausal woman requires estrogen to improve her quality of life, they get that. And if a non-gender conforming individual requires hormone treatment to mend their spirit, to lower their suicide risk, to improve their quality of life, and get their physical form to match with their gender identity, then I believe that they should get that. And that is a very easy thing to do. It does not cost us a lot, and it protects those communities very easily.
Mr. Featherly.
I think one of the key factors here is to be a good example. Be a friend to the LGBTQ community. Ensure that their freedoms aren't being taken away or impacted by things that are happening in politics. Right now with the SAVE Act, there's questions being for people, I guess it's not necessarily LGBTQ, but insurance, things like that aren't impacting certain communities. You know, being friends to everyone and ensuring that everyone has their freedoms protected.
Mr. Michal.
What I think is great is we live in a country that has a constitution, and it allows people to live by that constitution. It's not up to me to determine what people do, what people choose to do. I was raised as a Christian and I was told not to be judgmental. But one thing I think is important is that we protect our children from certain things that could potentially be predatory or could potentially harm them. And I think that that's one of the stances that the Republicans have been very boisterous about, is protecting children. Whether it's through education or whether it's through protecting them and their ability to make decisions as an adult. And I think in this country, most people, myself included, want people to be happy, prosperous. But at the same time, we can't bring in our children in certain factors. And I think that we've created laws to sustain people's ability, but at the same time, we do need to protect children.
Mr. Blomquist, you get first chance at our next question. How will you expand mental health and substance use treatment access in areas where distances are long and staffing is short?
I think we need to I had answered a question earlier. I believe that in areas where services are needed, we cannot rely on for-profit entities to provide that service. Here in the Upper Peninsula, we have very few mental health care beds. The distance between you and those beds is vast. And as somebody who's been on Iron Mountain City Council for 11 years, I can tell you when we have somebody in mental health crisis, what that looks like is one of our police officers having to sit with that person as a glorified orderly and then having to work them downstate and then sit on them. And it's substandard and it's inhumane, and we need to have the federal government fill gaps in places like Northern Michigan for things like mental health services. That includes a massive increase in our beds and working outside of a private healthcare system to do those things. Having publicly funded, publicly managed mental health care facilities that should be on par with the rest of the world.
Mr. Featherly.
Mental health is such an extreme factor in today's world. You know, we're just starting to understand everything that it impacts. And that's one more thing within our education system that I would love to see improved. Universal healthcare, I think, should also be in place to help cover this issue. You know, like Kyle said, to help cover the sheer distance in between locations. You know, we're out here in the middle of the woods. I grew up, you know, far outside of town, and making sure that there is access available should be our top priority.
Mr. Michal, a reminder on that question. How will you expand mental health and substance use treatment access when distances are long and staffing is short?
I think we can all agree that mental health has become a rising concern in our country. But I don't know that the data exists as to why it's continuing to increase. And I think that us putting money into areas of treatment operations is a temporary fix to a permanent problem. I think we need to really focus on the qualitative and quantitative research that's required to figure out what is driving mental health issues and concerns in our country, so we can better evaluate and distribute the proper resources into those areas. our congressional district, we don't have providers, we don't have support systems, we typically run through the judicial system to place individuals. I had this issue happen over in Menominee. I spoke to the sheriff for 30 minutes about mental health and those concerns. So we know that mental health is continuing to increase, but we need to have the data to support where we need to put the proper channels of funding.
Mr. Stiles.
Thank you. This issue is near and dear to my heart, and I have to tell you, I do not have an answer for it. I volunteer at Habitat for Humanity in Traverse City. I see the people that are coming in for those services at night, and there's a conglomeration of needs out there, but mental health, the issues are so complex. The people need support. They need for us to understand the kind of healing that they need, the therapy that they need access to. And the reality is, we're just not, as a community, we're not saying we want to help treat this issue, we want to figure out what's going on. I have people in my own community that's well, we don't want those people in our backyard. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm just telling you, I'm very passionate about it. So what I can do as a person is I go volunteer.
Hanging your candidates, just 2 more questions before closing statements. Mr. Featherly, you'll be the first to answer. What specific actions are you currently taking or intend to take to assure citizens of the 1st District that their voice will be heard and have significant influence on laws and policies affecting us?
Well, one thing that I'm currently doing is I am actively, this is a large district, so I am actively doing town halls every other week. You can find it on my website, but I think making sure that people have a voice and making sure that candidates know what the issues are that people are focused on. I think it's very important, and I think having that open line of communication is key.
Mr. Michal.
If you could for me, could you please repeat that question?
Sure. Let me find it. What specific actions are you currently taking or intend to take to assure citizens of the 1st District that their voices will be heard and have significant influence on laws and policies affecting us?
I think one of the differences in my campaign is I'm the only candidate that I know of, no offense to you guys, that have actually gone into the other parties' areas and tried to open dialogue. I go to Democrat meetings and Republican meetings, try to understand my constituents on both sides. And I know that when I go into certain meetings that I'm either not very welcome or that my position is going to be taken in a defensive tone. And I've experienced that, and it's unfortunate, but I understand that that's the political climate for which we have. My campaign is about bridging the divides, and I consistently show that I'm willing to show up at events where I know that I'm either outnumbered or outgunned to just try to open up dialogue and promote conversations and try to learn. And I think that that's one of the things that we're struggling with the most in this country is when you hear Republican or you hear Democrat, you instantly shut down if you're one of those positions. And it's unfair and it's unfortunate. And if we don't find a way to work together, we're gonna have some significant problems moving forward.
Mr. Stiles.
Thank you. Maybe this question should have been better directed at the other candidates that are not here tonight. So you have 4 candidates for Michigan's 1st Congressional District sitting here before you. I think we all believe that it's important that everybody's voice is heard. For me, it's the reason that I'm running. I felt like always somebody else was gonna get out there and do that, and then I would just support them, vote, I've never missed a vote since I was able to, and I thought like somebody else did it. And then I realized, people are not doing it, and I need to get out there and do something for myself. So hopefully you're seeing that we are interested in hearing the voices of this district.
Mr. Blomquist.
We're all over the district. We're traveling our butts off. We're heading into every single community, every single type of room. And I think that honestly, these forums that have been put on and are scheduled throughout the district, throughout the next several months, are crucially important because they cut through the BS and they get us in front of you people in a vulnerable condition to be able to express our views in the most unfiltered manner. And I think that that is crucially important. Like Wayne said, there are folks that are not here who have foregone that opportunity, and they would rather stay in safe rooms. I personally, even though I'm running for the Democratic nomination, I have never personally considered myself a Democrat. I believe that partisanship is a wedge that is used to divide the American working class, and we need to talk through those things. And so I don't see Republican voters as Republicans any more than I see myself as a Democrat. I see them as an ally in the American working class, and I will open my ears and my heart to them, and then I will that helps me serve them without hang-ups.
And Mr. Michael, you will be the first to answer our last question from the audience. What is your top political concern, and how do you intend to address it if elected?
My top political concern is the division in our country. It's almost like a civil war. We can't have conversations that are meaningful. We can't be respectful to each other. One of the reasons that I got into this run in the first place is because I wanted to have civil discourse. I think it's really important. And you can't get anything done that benefits this country and puts Americans first without having those conversations. And I know they're difficult because it teaches us to have to dig really deep within ourselves to overcome some of those bias that we have. But that's the whole point of our constitutional republic and the democracy for which we live. If we can't have conversations, if we can't come together and make decisions that benefit all Americans, then we're failing as a nation. And so my first priority when I get there is to open those avenues of dialogue and say, let's come to the table and let's make some decisions that are really going to benefit Americans in this country.
Mr. Stiles.
I am here before you to defend democracy. We don't get anything else without doing that first. And so there might be a lot of issues that we talked about here tonight, but none of that's going to happen if we have a rogue government that is not following the Constitution. So my goal, my number one goal, is to flip this congressional seat blue and get a guardrail back up on our democracy.
Mr. Blomquist.
I believe the biggest challenge that's facing America right now is income inequality. We have great inequity in our society right now. We have a society where 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, where the majority of Americans don't have $1,000 in their bank account for an unforeseen expense. And at that same time, we have such gross wealth accumulating at the top. And those two things are not coincidental. That the existence of the billionaire class is a consequence of uncompensated labor here in the working class. And they are the direct result of our affordability crisis here on the ground. I do not believe that we should have billionaires. I believe that the existence of billionaires, especially centibillionaires, people have $100 billion or going on $1 trillion, that is a sign of an unhealthy society, and that we need to add equity to our society by taxing the wealthy.
Mr. Featherly.
I think my biggest concern right now is external influence within our politics. I think ending Citizens United would be one of my first, my key goals if I was elected. I don't think that we can truly have a government that works for the people if we have so much external influence within our politics.
All right, now we'll transition into our closing statements. A reminder to candidates, you have 1 minute. This was determined by the draw earlier, so Mr. Michael, you get to begin.
First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. It's difficult to be up here and share your views in a form of vulnerability. But one thing that's exciting is the fact that you guys are willing to take your time on a Friday night to come out here and share it with us, to participate in something that is mutually beneficial, not only for our district, but also for our country. This proves that we can come together and we can be civil. Not one time did you guys do anything that was disruptive or rude or offensive to us, and I hope that we as candidates provided the information to you to better inform you of where we stand, or at least give you an understanding that we're here and that we're fighting for you. And at the end of the day, I may not have earned your support, but I hope that I earned your respect. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Featherly.
Firstly, thank you all for being out here tonight, and thank you for creating this space for this conversation. I'm excited about this campaign because I believe the United States is capable of so much. You know, we are a country of innovation, a country of diversity, and a country built on the idea that government was made for the people. When we have leadership that listens and operates transparently and stays true to the people it represents, we can shift away from the division that we see today and towards real solutions. I'm running as an independent because my loyalty belongs to the people and to my own principles, not to party leadership, not to external sources. That's the commitment I'm making to you. No party, just people.
Mr. Stiles.
I'm not running for Congress because I need a job. And I'm not running for Congress simply to try to move the bar. I'm running for Congress to flip this congressional seat blue and get a guardrail back up on our democracy. I can't do it alone. We're up against billionaires, super PACs, and all the money that has entered our political system since Citizens United. But I think we have something even better now. People who are ready to stand up and fight for Michigan's future. People just like you. So let's get some boots on the ground. If you can volunteer for one of our campaigns, we thank you. If you can make donations financially, I thank you. I'm asking you for your vote so that together we can defend democracy, we can raise up the people, and we can restore the promises of America. For everybody in this room tonight, for everybody across Michigan's 1st Congressional District, and for anybody who's ever been told they can't have a fair shot at the American dream. Thank you. Let's get to work.
Mr. Blomquist.
I thank everybody for coming out. I think this is an important forum. I have a great deal of respect for everybody up here. We're all flying trapeze with no net, so to speak, and so I respect anybody that goes through that process. I hope that people understand the sincerity of which I am undertaking this. I am always going to speak my beliefs. That's the foundation of this campaign. I am never going to try to triangulate to what I think is popular or what is, tenable based on the latest poll or the results of the latest election. I do not believe that we should be triangulating our positions based on what we believe is popular and accepting injustice and inequity as a result. I believe that we should set justice and equity as our North Star, and my job as a politician should be to make that popular. And if I fail at that, then that's on me. But I'm always going to fight for my neighbors, regardless of how they voted in the last election, because I know that they deserve more from their government, and I'm working to make it so.
Well, I will echo the sentiments of many of our candidates. You've been a fantastic audience tonight. I thank you all. Let's take a moment now that you can be raucous and give a round of applause to all of our candidates. Thank you to all of you for being up here. It's been a lot of questions thrown at you in a very short period of time, and I appreciate all the comments. And this concludes my part of the evening. I'll turn it back over to Calvin.
Thanks again to the candidates, and thank you, Melissa, my number one, for Lake Superior Academy. Oh my goodness, I looked at Melissa Turner and my mind went to
The Lake's great too.
Yeah. And let's just say LSSU Student Government Association and the Eastern Upper Peninsula League of Women Voters and our volunteers for Up North Advocacy. One more time, please. So I want to encourage everyone here to stay engaged. This isn't a one-and-done sort of situation. Go home, look these candidates up, look up the ones that aren't here on the stage with them tonight, learn about them, share that knowledge with your friends and family. I want you to make a plan to vote and help those close to you make a plan to vote. But also understand that even though all these candidates are great and they have some amazing ideas and a lot of ambition, they cannot make change alone. They need all of you who care to join them and make that change. So, whatever you can do to make the first district a better place to live, I encourage you to seek that out and do that. And if you need help, Up North Advocacy is here for you. And now, that concludes this. I want to encourage everyone to join us at Bird's Eye Outfitters downtown Sault Sainte Marie for an after refreshment with the candidates if they come with us. Otherwise, we can chat with one another about issues that matter to us. Bird's Eye doesn't have food across the street. Alpha still does, Zorba's, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, thank you guys so much. This was great.
Thank you again, Lauren.
Oh, well.
That sort of thing.
No one-
It's not, look, sorry.